Welcome to the Clean Data Chronicles. I'm your host, Jake Sanders, sitting here with the team, Jay Mandel, Michael Munson, Nathan Taylor. From episode 1, we brought you an overarching view of data, and now we're going to dig into it.
Data is the measurements of things. A couple weeks ago, we had the snowstorm. It started out with a 15-inch prediction, and it ended up at 22. And so it's not like I look at the weather forecast and I just say, oh, they changed it to 22 inches, so I can't ever trust this ever again. Data is changing the forecast over time.
Right.
It's a source of measurement. It's a source of assessment that you just put these different pieces together and you come up with this information that leads to the forecast. It used to be that I could have a thermometer outside my house and that would tell me what the temperature was. But now I know that there's all these weather stations out there that are reporting, and there are many of them that are all around me. It's kind of weird to think, what's the temperature outside? Well, let me look at my app instead of just take a thermometer and see, but it's the same difference.
Sometimes that forecast is changing, but we don't experience that change as deception. Why does that feel normal? Jay, do you want to take this?
With weather, we're dealing with a lot of things that are beyond our control. Just think about wind patterns.
The insurance companies call that acts of God.
Acts of God. Let's imagine that there's a storm coming up the Atlantic. And, the Atlantic, thinking about a tropical storm. How many times in the summer do we get all upset about the fact that something's coming, get all prepared, and then all of a sudden it goes off to sea? Just a reality of life. And if you take that analogy and apply it to other things that we're seeing, we live in a society that's filled with inflection points, data points that are subject to change on a dime, and they're all measured. We're measuring so many things, like when you're on an app, your keystrokes are measured. When you buy something, what you listen to, all these things are measured. And if we're going to take it from weather to digital measurement, I think it's a little bit different, don't you think?
When you collect the data, it may only be accurate for so long, and then there's changes. Depending on what you're measuring, things can shift a lot. Weather can shift a lot. Online, social media engagement with certain topics shifts daily. It's not that the data is wrong, it's that data can change. And how you process the data is really the next step in that change.
Well, 1 point of data is not equal to 100 points of data or 1,000 points of data.
What we just outlined was that you need to capture data and have historical records, existing patterns, which is the only real way to triangulate and gather things. But if without a legacy of precedents, you have nothing mature to build any frame of reference on. So I think a lot of people are like, trash it because it's old and out of touch. Jay, you have an idea?
We live in unprecedented times.
Damn it. Is that true?
And if the data was so accurate, then we'd be able to predict the future, right? The thing that happens next is not necessarily the thing that happened before. There may be reasons to predict that something might happen. We'll call that a pattern. But just because you understand a pattern doesn't mean that you have a crystal ball.
But this doesn't mean that you're always going to get kicked in the face by the future. Like, there's a lot of people that aren't like, holy shit, it's Tuesday. Like, you saw the calendar. The time happens to you. It's like, I do agree that Mike Tyson's law, you have a plan until you get punched in the face, is true. I also think if you're getting punched in the face all the time, you're in the wrong place. Nathan, talk about this composite, but also relying on it as a system of record that's required.
If you're collecting data across time, which we do with our weather, we can look at past historical trends going back decades, and that might help us influence or expect what's coming next. But it's not always 100%, right? We can't always extrapolate exactly what's going to happen. And there's a fun little joke. If I get married this week, does that mean every 7 days I'll have a new wife? Well, no, right? There's certain reasonable things you can extrapolate. Data is really the foundation, but it needs to be processed into information. It needs to be taken, and it requires that piece of which sets of data must we look at together to get that picture that we can then make decisions based off of. Sometimes if you're working off of older data, processing and the information you get may not be accurate anymore.
We were talking with an expert about data broker databases today, and he was saying that there are as many as 1,000 data points data brokers have on individual people. I can't even think of 1,000 things. How think of the challenge you have, someone who is a data broker collecting data on individual people. And you've got all these data points that are snapshots, and you've got to put them together in the right context to make sure that they make sense. Some data points you may get to update, some you may not. And there are decisions being made on the data sets. Basically, they're investing money into assumptions that they're making based on it. Anything that is digital is considered data. That doesn't mean it's accurate. So just data being data is not truth. And I think there's this bias that we have that when we think data, oh, it must be true.
We've all seen numbers improve while outcomes don't. In a situation like that, what is actually true?
What is actually true is the result that you're looking to get to. So if you're in business and you don't make money, then that's the truth, right? The truth is you did marketing in order to sell more. If you don't sell more, it doesn't matter what flashy thing is on your dashboard.
I think people are willing to put on their big people pants and realize that. I think the numbers look good. The outcomes, I can't feel them.
My CTR is high, but I didn't sell anything.
I know what that is. The searches are in, the traffic is up.
Brand, of course.
But the numbers look good, but the feeling isn't there. What do we hold on to?
It comes down to how has that data been collected, who collected that data, and what are we actually analyzing it for?
You listen by end of year wrap and they say, oh, Jay listened to this kind of music, and if anyone knows me, it's going to be Luther Vandross and the like. Why is it that a bunch of years ago Let It Go was on the top of my list?
I don't even know what that is.
Something that was Elsa. My kids were listening to that, but point of it is that if let's say that data point went into a data broker's thing, and then a marketer bought that and started giving me Disney promotions. It might be good for my kids, but for me as an adult, no thank you.
I downloaded my Experian profile. On that profile, the list was very intense because it was like normal things, where you are, who you are, stats about you, age, locations. But then it was my preference for certain vehicles listed in detail. Is this a Honda guy? Is this a guy who likes sedans? And there was a whole subsection in the spreadsheet that was just dedicated to luxury cars, understanding how I felt about certain brands. It listed brands inside my profile. So it was like, oh, if I can just get from the source, if I think they're a Jeep or Wrangler, Cherokee, Saab, the Volvo guy, let's see if it's a Subaru person.
What do you actually drive? That's the truth.
A Honda.
I brought up this idea of synthetic insights. We've learned that a lot of times these brokers piece together what they have to make predictions, but that's not real.
Well, Mark is sort of questionable, just to the reasons why Nathan said, depending on how you ask the question, what the question is. I listened to the Center for Humane Technology. I listened to their podcast, Jay. I listened to it the other day. They were talking about AI, how it's being used. They had a panel of some serious, smart people based on a Harvard Business Review. 1 year ago, we discovered that they are referring to an AI company that sells companion bots, who use their own LLM to run a study on what they think people are searching. And it was just like so bullshit. But a really good journalistic quality podcast is pointing to the wrong thing and taking a very serious stance about it. And you're like, what an abuse. And I didn't know what to say because I'm just like, did you know that wasn't true? I sound like the Lizard Man. I sound like Conspiracy Steve.
Well, when this happened to us at the Mac, and
I fell for it.
How long did it take us to unravel that?
Couple days.
How many people have the appetite and curiosity to go down that goose chase that we went through in order to figure out where the data came from, how it was sourced, all that stuff?
Nathan, what do you think about that tail wagging the dog, like cooking up the data, like selling it, like washing it through the media?
It's really how you're processing that data. And this is a big problem as well when certain entities want certain results. If you're interacting with a person and you're collecting the data through surveys, just the way you ask the questions, I could almost try and influence the way you respond to these surveys by asking questions and using definitions in a certain way. If I have an ulterior motive, I can easily only process some of the data, influence the way that data was collected, and I can get a result closer to what I want. And I think that's dangerous. If I'm paying someone to get me a certain result, that will influence the way the data is trusted.
We're talking about the data broker databases, and we know that they're like 27% accurate. So you've got people making decisions based on 27% accuracy. That's not going to yield to good outcomes, right? So if we have clean human data, which is what we advocate for, then it's potential to have 100% accuracy.
I was envisioning what Jay was talking about as the storm approaches the East Coast. That map they use, the map has gotten so much more confusing in our lifetime. It used to just be like magnets that you'd put on something. And now they have that spaghetti that shows you the potential, and it's like 15 different pathways. But what's so interesting is that's model looking at behavior when, if you look the source of the behavior, there's only one direction that it would ever take, but it's uncharted. I think that's the thing. People are abstracting away even caring that there was a source, because we can start making more data fly off the data. And I'm really concerned because, as you're saying, clean data is a source of provenance. I wonder, we're blowing past this conversation. This is a very mature conversation.
The big thing is you almost need some form of regulation and accountability in the first place. You said if you're betting on things that may not be reality, and I think that's the concern right now, is we're really new in the digital age. I know it's been a decade or two, but in reality, the internet is growing and adapting in new ways. But there's no real groundwork to say, here is what is verifiable truth in our data. Here is what is the guidelines for what is right and what is wrong, and how you collect and use that data. I think that's the first step, is as we're waking up to how chaotic things are, there needs to be a little bit of a structure and order, because it helps, one, protect us and our privacy if we understand how our data is collected. And two, it makes predictions and reality fall closer together, right? Because if there's verifiable ways you've collected that data, then sure, you can bet on things and it's more trustworthy.
If I could bring back the beginning of weather, there's something really cool about the way Michael described it. The Weather Underground is a lot of people who have decided on behalf of everyone to put a thermometer outside of their house. And now you kind of look at that person who's like, I have the weather thing up. And now you start seeing there's a civic responsibility to creating your own weather station closer into your house, inside your world. And then the benefit of that is, yes, please become a citizen scientist for your own weather data that's happening to you, the climate that you think you exist in, the patterns that you think that are affecting you. But the reason why Weather Underground is dope is because it's everyone working together to get a better sense collectively of what is mattering to individuals. I think there's some kind of beautiful personal responsibility. It's like this virtuous cycle. Weather gives us that because we believe in act of God. But finance doesn't give us that because we're believing in an act of God from finance. And can Todd get us there? And are those numbers real? And Todd is an asshole. He's washing money. Who knows? It happens to all of us. Catastrophes happen to all of us. So we really pay attention to the models in weather. We really take a sense of responsibility. I think we have to start thinking of the weather of data and whether we want to take it serious.
I like the use of weather and weather.
You get one pun a day.
Spelled two different ways. What I want to say is that it's now accessible. How expensive is it to buy that thermometer to participate in Weather Underground and have it connected to the internet?
I don't know.
Very little.
The
entry in our lifetime is a lot different than, to be a meteorologist, and you need to buy some fancy equipment. This day,
right.
You have your home and you have your Nest in the home. You have your Alexa in the home. But what you said, Jake, is different than having Nest in the home. I mean, Nest is good. It's good for protection. The
platform,
yeah, but it also could be used for bad too, for spying, for
of course, yeah.
But the weather stuff seems to be a little bit more innocent, right?
Based on measurement and gaining a sense of interpretability. I think what Nathan was saying was extrapolation, interpolation. In between these things is interpretation. And then you have to have a sense of data. And that's where I think weather happens to all of us.
When clean data is being used at scale. As long as dirty data is being used, we have the situation that we have now, which is ways of lots of bad decisions leading to bad outcomes or ROI. So when we talk about clean data being human truth, think about it logically. You're a business owner, right? Or are you going to make decisions to maximize your profits. It's to understand human truth because humans are your customers. So I don't understand why anyone would resist wanting to embrace clean data because it's for the benefit and interest of everybody.
And you earn trust. Imagine you're the business that decides that instead of buying a database totally inaccurate and having a privacy policy that, listen, we can take this and we could take that. And if you sue us, we'll just point at the privacy policy. Well, what if you were transparent and said to the customer, hey, I'm going to ask you what you want? And there are brands that do this. Like Peloton could say, do you have a history of injury? What kind of music do you like? That's better than predicting. So that allows for a much better ecosystem because the customer feels heard, they get a better experience, and so does the brand. The brand is able to develop things that the customer wants. They could charge more for it. And that's the clean data utopia.
When the numbers are good, but the outcomes aren't, you feel disconnect. What's actually true? I think it hit on the pyramid, which is this information that you're talking about could be good numbers or bad numbers. It needs to be expressed into knowledge, and then we need to institutionalize it into wisdom. And then we would be able to sense what those outcomes were. But it seems like there's a pyramid that we're failing to build in between these places. Do you have an example of a time in your life where you had a data set and then you were like, hold on, we need to have a conversation. This now is an operational truth.
My son, he's in a robotics competition. They went to event number 1 and they lost. It was their first attempt, and they realized they were looking around the room, and the data said that the other groups that won had the autonomous control. The other groups that won had multi-directional wheels, and we don't have them. And so if we're going to compete in the next competition and have a chance, we need to put those autonomous photos and the wheels in. And they put it in and they did a lot better. That data comes from observation. They encourage scouting. What is scouting? It's going around to all the other competitors, looking at their robots and asking them, tell me about your robot. How did you build it? How does it work? And then they collect those data points, and based on those data points, they make decisions. And when they make those decisions, they get better outcomes.
I love that. That's a great example because it does hit on the you pay attention to. There was something that Nathan said earlier, which was the goal of data is collection, sure, but knowing what to pay attention to, what to attend to. And there's machine learning that we're giving these attentional things to. We're saying, hey, pay attention to this, just disregard that.
I have one final piece. That
get in here, brother.
You may have, if any one of you guys are history buffs and you like watching old World War I or World War II, they wanted to improve aircraft that came back from combat missions, and they're like, all right, well, let's collect the data on where these aircrafts are damaged so that we can improve our next generation of aircrafts to be better, to survive. And the problem is only data that they collected was from the aircrafts that made it home. They didn't collect the data from the aircrafts that got shot down. So if I'm going to make decisions based on what I collected, I'm going to armor the parts of the aircraft that may not matter because the aircrafts that got shot in the engine didn't make it home. So I think that's very important when it comes to data is we can fall into those pitfalls as well. We can collect data that may only be a piece of a larger set. That's why it's important to have more clear established rules on what is the right way to do things and put the ability to validate the data back into the hands of the people that the data is.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh my gosh. And then we ended with survivorship bias. That is wonderful. Let's end it here. Dude, Nathan, Michael, Jay, thank you again. Episode 2 of the Clean Data Chronicles. We're coming back with more. If you like us, I don't know what you're supposed to do. Subscribe. Yeah. And throw us a comment.
We're on YouTube. Yeah. If you made it to this point, mission accomplished on our part.